So there is some really cool stats on there that I want to show you because I do think it's important. Everyone focuses on, again, the technical implementation without understanding what the, can I just honestly, like, sorry, I just really need my deck because I can talk about the stats, but honestly you won't find them of interest until you see them because they are really mind-boggling. So things to think about. When everyone thinks about AI, it's literally two camps. There is no in between. There is apocalyptic, world's gonna end, everything's gonna go to hell, and then there's this utopian, world where AI is gonna solve every problem, humans are gonna sit back, focus on art and reading and doing fun stuff, and machines are gonna do all the work. And it doesn't quite work like that. Thank you. Thank you. So let's jump right into it. So these are the stats I was telling you about. So when you're looking at the numbers, these are significant, and I know they look like they're all bad. They are not all bad. There are some really bad, but they are not all bad. One of the important things I want you to balance out is when you're looking at AI, shadow AI, and the use of shadow AI along with its use in the workplace, it's really important that you understand that you can't talk about one without the other. So we're going to touch on shadow AI just a little bit, only because it is important in the context of how your people are utilizing AI. So when you're looking at the numbers, so the one I do want to point out too is a 72% in the bottom corner. 72% say that they have received no AI training. This is significant because it's akin to sending people out without really giving them the tools on how to use it effectively. So we talk about the loss in job displacement. A lot of people see it as an AI risk. Other people talk about, agents going rogue. This is something really bad that's going to happen, your biases. But 35% of your employees actually consider AI workplace displacement as a threat, as an AI threat. But there was a recent report last year from, I believe it was the World Economic Forum, and it talked about it. 92 million jobs will be displaced by AI in the next 5 years. 92 million globally. Now, what's interesting, and I do want to point this out where you have to temper it from the sky is falling scenario, what I do want to temper it out to is that also within the 5 years, you're going to have 170 million jobs created. So the problem is not the AI and the change that's going to cause by implementing AI, and it's not where we are at our workplace. It is the chaos that's going to reign in between for a few years. It's going to get ugly. It's going to get bumpy. I was just speaking to some colleagues, and they were telling me that, and I was telling them that I was speaking to someone last week, and British Petroleum. So if you imagine, and this is not this is roles a lot of times that are not AI focused, but the 65,000 people in British Petroleum, and they did a study on it, are going to lose their jobs in the next 2 years because they are going to automate everything. So if you were from my generation and you think you work for a job, you work there for the next 30, 40 years, and then you retire because that's what it looks like, you are not going to have that luxury anymore. And now, if that's just one company, how many other companies are doing it? So we are just going to touch on shadow AI, but we're going to focus on it from the context of why do employees use shadow AI. Now, I worked for the federal government for 31 years, so I can tell you, we don't always buy the tools that people need. We buy the tools that are cheap. Hey, Lena, look, I know you asked for this tool, but we're going to get you this one. It was $100 cheaper. Meanwhile, it's created, it's a tool that doesn't work, that doesn't do the job that you want it to do. It's not user-friendly, and really, it's half as effective. So it's no wonder that people are focusing on using the tool that they can actually access that gets the job done. Because at the end of the day, when people use shadow AI, and we know the risks that are caused there, like 35% of all, 40% actually of all breaches by 2027, 40% of all breaches will be resulting from the use of shadow AI. So we know it's a significant risk, but yet we're not really focusing on what tools our teams need and why they need them to do their jobs. People are not malicious. They're not using shadow AI because they're malicious and they want to hurt your company. They're doing it because they think it'll help them do their job faster and better. And if you focus at it from that end, it is not a intent. There is no maliciousness. It is about, efficiency and how do we make that work. So I bring this up because it's something that I talk about with people. So I'm going to give you an example. So when I was still in the RCMP, I did some training for one of the big banks around insiders and understanding sort of where their gaps were. And if anybody here works in any of the banks or has any context with them, they don't like charges, they don't like publicity. So the goal is, Lena, just tell us how we can interview these people so that we can find out what the problem is, address the issue, and then make it go away quietly. No problem. But every now and then what's going to happen is you're going to have a situation where you have no choice but to call the police and report it as a crime. And you would literally be negligent and complicit if you didn't report it. I view shadow AI in the same vein. So, one of the things we're talking about is, do we have like an amnesty where you can say to your employees, hey, everyone, just come and tell us what tools you're using, tell us how you're doing it, where you've used it, what information you've put into it, and no problem, no issues, no one's gonna get in trouble, no one's gonna lose their job. That might work for maybe 60, 70% of your workforce. The other 40% will have put things into it that are so damaging to your organization, whether it's sensitive data, whether it's intellectual property, anything that really harms your company that really you aren't gonna have a choice. So you can't offer something if you aren't gonna genuinely fulfill it, if that makes sense. So you can't say to someone you're not gonna get in trouble and then be like, oh hell no, that was so bad, I have no choice, but you're gonna be in trouble. You can't do that because you can't, I'm not gonna use the word that I would have used there, but all that to say is you can't offer it if you can't genuinely mean it. So again, this is food for thought. There is no easy answer on how you solve that problem. So what are the impacts of implementing AI, adopting, and then now potentially displacing your workforce? These are the kind of things that impact your employees. So I want to talk about loss of confidence for one, and that's very closely tied to not correcting AI. This has happened a few times. I was talking to a client who was talking about, people don't speak up in their organization. And to me, that's a culture issue, but they don't speak up when something somebody uses AI and they come up with something and it's wrong, but they don't want to say anything because it's like, who am I? I'm not going to correct AI. I mean, that's the model. The company paid for it, so that's what we're going to do. The problem there is people are losing their ability to speak up and be empowered. And I've seen this happen a lot around hiring practices. Where companies bring in a tool that says, okay, we're going to tell you if this is a real person or a deep fake, because that's really becoming almost like an epidemic. And so the person presents well, so they have, detection tools, and they were using a tool, and I'm not gonna name it, obviously, and they were using a tool, and the tool said, nope, this is a real person, gave it a green check mark. Thankfully, in this particular organization, the CISO and the security teams had developed a really good culture around empowerment. And what that meant was an employee raised their hand and went, something doesn't feel right there. Can we talk about it? And when they did dive down a little bit deeper, the tool was wrong, and it was a deep fake. So you want to empower people. You don't want people to sit on it and not answer. And the other side of it is you have two things there that look totally opposite. Blindly adopting or unwillingness to trust. And they are the yin and yang of the same coin. They are the opposite sides. You have people that are like, I'm going to do whatever the model tells me. Just think of it like the GPS. Remember when GPS first came out and people were driving into lakes and up these logging roads and had to get rescued? This is a very real risk. People just assume that whatever is on that screen or whatever they are told is the truth, and they're not applying critical thinking skills to say, okay, is this actually something I can verify? And the other one is not trusting at all. And you do see both sides in companies, sometimes even in the same teams, where one team or a couple of people on one team are like, no, everything is great, look how amazing this is. And others on the same team are like, hell no, we're not doing that. So those are the kind of things, and these are constant battles that are going on inside your organizations. So when we talk about them, this is where culture becomes such a really significant part of how you build things. So reinforcing biases, again, this all comes into it. These are all parts of the same coin. The more that you let your teams feel like they have to do whatever the model says, you're going to end up with problems. So what do your employees ask themselves? So some of these questions are culled from conversations that I have with organizations. I do a lot of work around culture and building, and not a checkbox. I hate checkboxes more than anything. So anything that requires a bunch of checkbox is not really your culture. That's your audit. Really, that's what it is. And so these are questions that people genuinely ask. These are questions that people have around the whole, adoption in their own organizations. So one of the big ones is the bottom left there. It's about accountability, because who is accountable? And you see it constantly. There's more and more cases where someone just sort of, they're the human in the loop, but are they actually a human in the loop, or is it just their name that's signed to it? Because now they are liable. How much time are we giving people to actually assess and understand that they are the person accountable, because they signed off on it? So understanding what that actually means. Where does the accountability lie, and what does that look like? So one of the things I do want to talk about here, and people ask themselves these questions, because what's the one thing that we have as humans that AI does not have, that a tool does not have? Anyone? Intuition, brain. What was the other one? Empathy, experience, and emotions, all of those. It doesn't have, well, it doesn't yet. But again, it doesn't have those. And this is something that we have to consider. So imagine, and there's a lot of people in our world, in our community, in our cyberspace, that are really good at what they do. They have developed decades of experience, decades of expertise. Their entire identity is what they do, is their professional life. And I get it. I mean, I was a police officer for 31 years. I still talk about it as the we. It's not we anymore, I've retired. But all that to say is, when you have built an expertise and a specialty, what happens to you when that's suddenly gone, when that's now obsolete? So understanding what that looks like, what do people feel about it? And if people are scared in your organization, the types of things that we should be doing should be to reassure them, to talk about reskilling, because you are going to need to reskill. Like 59% of roles currently will need to be tweaked, transitioned, reskilled, and people will need to understand what that looks like. And so when you take that into account, the impact on your employees, and I mean, if you know me, you know I talk about insider threat a lot, and this is just an aside. This isn't even the whole risk. But what happens when you have employees that are like, well, they're going to replace me with AI anyway, so I may as well suck what I can out of the organization, and I'm going to take it and sell it to the highest bidder, because that's a real risk. But it's more about what is the right thing to do. And people are scared. I talk to employees who are worried about training the model, because once they've done that, they know that they're going to get replaced. So what does that look like? So what do your employees need? We talk about workplace transparency and trust. So if people do not like living in a vacuum, not being told. And in the absence of being told anything, people's minds will go everywhere. And that's where you have that discontent, the discord. People in your organization start leaving thinking, if they're gonna punt me anyway, I may as well get out while I can. So understanding what that need is before you get to that point. So be transparent. Hey, this is what we're gonna do. This is what we're thinking about. The other side of it is training. Have you taught people how to use tools effectively? Have you helped people understand how they can use their tools to enhance what they do in their day-to-day work? Or is it simply something you talk about, or it's talked about sort of at the higher management levels, but no one tells the employees what's going on? And that's something I see a lot, where the information doesn't trickle downwards, and it ends up really impacting people because they feel like they're the last to know. And it's almost like, someone's waiting for execution. At that point, it's just hanging over you. You just need to know what's going on with your life. Clear rules and policies, this is significant, because at the end of the day, if people don't know what they are and aren't allowed to do, you really aren't in a position where you can, sort of chastise anyone or get anyone in trouble if you haven't even given them what the ground rules are. As human beings, we work very, very well when we understand what our rules of engagement are, what we are allowed to do, what types of information we can use and we can input into the model, which ones we can't. So understanding that and working with your employees is probably one of the best things you can do. And then you balance it. It can't be like, about a year ago, which now in this space seems like 100 years ago, I was talking to one of our clients, and their goal was all AI, all the time, everything, and they were just gonna go no guardrails, no nothing. They were just completely in. It was honestly, I was like, whoa, please, time out. But then I have the opposite, which is companies that are so worried about getting it right that they don't do anything, that they don't say anything. And it's like, well, no, what we've just done is we've just shut down. No one's allowed to use AI on anything until we get our policy and our governance and everything perfect. Well, here's a news flash. You aren't going to get it perfect. It's going to change so quickly, so you aren't going to get it you aren't going to get it perfect. So just put something out is better than nothing. Because in those organizations, because again, I talked to the employees, and I said, oh, so you guys, what do you guys do? Do you guys use AI? And it was like, oh yeah, Lena, we can't use it on any of our work devices. So whenever we have a question, we just put it into our personal devices. So now you've not only lost control, you've lost all visibility. So these are the risks you create yourself when you aren't understanding that even if it's not perfect, put something out and give people some parameters. So how do you balance it? So again, this one's pretty straightforward. The world is changing. There is no doubt that it's changing, but focusing only on the technical implementation and adoption of AI without considering your people, you're actually hurting yourself in the end. You're hurting your implementation, you're hurting how people buy in. If your employees don't buy in, you're already going to be suffering challenges and obstacles that you really didn't need to struggle with. So I'll leave you with that because this is literally it. It will go so much smoother and so much more. You will have an employee workforce that will actually be understanding of it if you can include them in the process. Thank you.